So what you're looking at now is the statue of Andrew Jackson. This is an equestrian statue. There's 3 replicas of the statue. One is in Washington, D.C., one is in Tennessee, where Andrew Jackson's plantation was. And this one over here, this one is kind of unique for a couple of reasons. One is the inscription on it. It says, "The Union must and shall be preserved." So the statue was put up here in 1856. That was added during the Civil War, when the occupier over here, his name was Major General Benjamin the Beast Butler. He had some issues with the people of New Orleans, so it's one of the things he put in there to kind of do that in spite of the people of New Orleans. But another thing over here is you see Andrew Jackson's statue is tipping his cap to the apartment on the upper riverside of the square, and this has to do with the woman who made all of this square so Parisian. So originally this was a very modest looking square. It was Place d'Armes under the French, Plaza de Armas under the Spanish. It's kind of a military parading ground. And then late in the 18th century, the guy who kind of owned the property over here, his name was Andrés Almonostar y Rojas, or Don Andrés Almonostar y Rojas. He, in his late 60s, married a younger French Creole wife, and they had a couple of kids. One of them, her name was Micaela Almonostar. And she, when she was 15 years old, she got married off to her 16-year-old cousin from France, Celestine Pontalba. Now, when she gets married, her father-in-law, Baron Pontalba, says to her, "If you die in childbirth," which happened a lot back then, "all the money will go to me." So she was heir to a lot of money because her mother remarried, her father had a lot of money, her mother had a lot of money. So father-in-law Pontalba from France says to her, "If you die in childbirth, all the money will go to our family, the Pontalbas." Now, she refused to sign that agreement, and that was kind of the beginning of the end of that relationship, because years later, one of her kids was in military school, and he escaped or left military school to go live with his mama here in New Orleans, and father-in-law Pontalba takes her off the will. So she goes to France, to a place called Mont-le-Vauc, to reconcile with 70-year-old, at this point, Baron Pontalba, and she's staying up in her room at the chateau. And the next morning after arrival, father-in-law Pontalba goes up to her room with 2 dueling pistols, knocks on the door, she opens the door, and he fires 5 bullets into her. 2 take off her fingers in defensive wounds, 3 hit her chest, she collapses. Father-in-law Pontalba at this point realized what he had done. He kills himself that day, and somehow Micaela Pontalba, now she has, by the way, 2 last names, Micaela Almonostar after her father and Pontalba for marriage. She somehow survives this thing, kind of like a bionic woman, and she decides to come back to New Orleans, and she wants to flip basically the property of her father in this square. This is a very modest looking area, and she hires a couple of the most famous architects in New Orleans, Henry Howard and James Gallier Sr., fires them, fights with the builders. But the long story of this whole thing is she builds these huge apartment buildings on both sides of the square, and they're now some of the oldest rented out apartments in the country, and she wanted to be remembered. So the cast iron fences that you have in the galleries over here have a monogram with their 2 last names, Almonostar Pontalba, AP. So that's the monogram you have over here. And there's this urban legend around here, which I believe is true, is that she had kind of an affair at some point with Andrew Jackson. But when he heard about all her shenanigans, when she was kind of yelling at the builders, climbing up on ladders, wearing pants, being very unladylike, he told her at some point, "Micaela, you're being very unladylike. I will never tip my cap to you." And therefore, in the 1850s, when they brought this statue over here, she positions the statue as though he's tipping his cap to the apartment over there, because that is where she lived with her son. So kind of like she had the last laugh over here. And because of Micaela Pontalba, this square looks so Parisian. So if you were to fly in your imagination to Paris, this will be, there's a very similar square called Place de Vosges that looks kind of like this square over here. So originally the buildings behind me, the Cabildo and the Presbytere, had flat roofs. She comes over here and this whole thing becomes very Parisian, as you can see today.